Third grade module 5, lesson 16. I can place whole number fractions and fractions between whole numbers on the number line. Here's a number line with the endpoints 1 and 2. It starts at 1 and ends at 2. We have been talking about number lines that started at 0 and ended at 1. Our 0 has moved. It didn't disappear, it's just down here. We can't see it. The arrow right here tells us that 0 is down here, that there's more numbers, just like we know there's more numbers after 2. But now instead of talking about fractions between 0 and 1, we're talking about fractions that are between 1 and 2. And since our number line isn't starting at 0, we wouldn't start with 0/4. We would start at 4/4, right? Because it goes 0, and then I have 1, 2, 3, 4/4. When I have 4/4, I have 1 whole. That's what 1 is. And then 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, and 8/4. So I keep increasing my numerator by 1 place. My denominator stays the same. We're now talking about improper fractions, where the number on the numerator is larger than the number in the denominator. So 4/4 is the same as 1 and as 1 whole. We call this equivalence, when 4/4 and 1 have the same thing. If I gave you this 1 whole orange, and then I gave you the same orange, but I cut it into 4 pieces, you have the exact same amount. You have an equivalent amount. So if we're looking at 2, we see that there's 8/4. So if I give you 2 whole oranges, you still have 2 wholes. If I cut each of your oranges into 4 pieces, you would have 4 pieces plus 4 pieces, which is 8/4, right? What about if we were going to 3? So let's just say, we would next go to 9/4, 10/4, 11/4, 12/4. So we could keep counting like that. Here's our new number line, and now we're starting at 2, and this one goes all the way to 4. But we're missing a whole number. There's a number between 2 and 4, and that's number 3, 2, 3, 4, right? We really have to know, though, how many parts we have here. 1, 2, 3. So we're talking about thirds. I know this because from here to here is 1 jump, 2 jumps, 3 jumps, and I'm at a new whole number. This number line has been divided into thirds. To label our number line, to keep doing our fractions, I need to know how many thirds are equivalent to 2 wholes. So if I gave you 2 things, and I cut each of these into 3 pieces, how many pieces would you have? You'd have 3 pieces plus 3 pieces. We'd have 6 thirds. Here's my 6 thirds. Next would be 7 thirds, because I've only added 1 third with 1 jump. 8 thirds, 9 thirds. So 9 thirds is the same as 3 wholes. 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. 10 thirds, 11 thirds, 12 thirds. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3, 4 threes equals 12 thirds. Now we're going to go to our assignment, and we're going to be putting some fractions on our number line. So let's go. Number 1 says to estimate to equally partition and label the fractions on the number line. Label the wholes as fractions and box them. This one is done for you. So letter A, it talks about halves. They're using halves. So that's why there's a 2 in our denominator right here. There's a 2 here, and a 2 here, and a 2 here, and a 2 here, because my denominator does not increase. That bottom number is always talking about how many parts we have in the whole. The top number is our numerator, right? So we start at 0 with 0 halves. After 0, if we're counting, would be 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Letter B asks us to divide the line into thirds. So our thirds are going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller than our halves were, right? So we need to put really just 2 lines, because now I have 1 third. I'm going to label that as 1 third. and 2/3 and 3. Oh, you know what? I did the wrong. I was acting like I was starting at 0, but we didn't start at 0. We started at 1. So if I went 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, that's all my thirds. So 1 is 3/3. What comes after 3? 4/3, 5, 6/3. So we have to pay attention to the numbers in our endpoints. If we don't, we're going to do it the wrong way. Letter C is in halves again, so a line in the middle and a line in the middle, but now it's starting at 2. So let's put our box here. How many halves do we have at 2? We had 4 halves, so let's just use that information, 4 halves. If we add another half to that, we have 5 halves. And if we add another half to that, we have 6 halves, which is 3 wholes. Then we have 7 halves and 8 halves, which is 4 wholes. I'm going to go ahead and draw my boxes. Now we're talking about fourths. So I'm going to put these into 4 pieces by cutting each in half and then cutting those parts in half. So fourths, you need fourths from 3 to 4 and from 4 to 5. How many fourths do we have if we start at 3? Okay, so if I have 1 whole into fourths, that's 4 fourths. And if I have 2 holes into fourths, that's going to be 8 fourths. And I'm at 3, so if I add another hole and I cut it into fourths, I have 12 fourths. So let's, in our box, put 12 over 4. We have 12 fourths. I know that after 12 comes 13 and 14 fourths, 15 fourths, 16 fourths. So if I was to add another hole to this, I would have 16 fourths. And then 17 fourths, 18 fourths, 19 fourths, and 20 fourths. So that one might take you a little bit of time. There's a lot of fractions to put on there. So pause the video and get all of your information in. And when you're ready, let's do thirds down here. So if you need to pause, pause. This one goes from 6 to 9. So I need to put 7 and I need to put 8. There's my whole numbers, and we're going to put a lot of fractions on here. So then I need to break this 6 to 7. I need to partition it into thirds. So there's 1 part, 2 parts, and 3 parts. And 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts. I think I'm going to try out my typing tool on this one and just see. I'm going to go ahead and put my boxes on my whole numbers because it said in the directions to put a box around the fraction at the whole numbers. And then I'm going to see if I can get my typing tool working just right. Okay, so I paused and I went ahead and used the typing tool to get my numbers. And I also had to figure out how many thirds there were in 18 thirds. So I actually used some multiplication and I went thirds, okay, that's 3. And I have 6 holes. So I have 6 holes with 3 pieces in each of them. 6, 12, 18. So that's going to be 18 thirds. So that's how I figured out that number. And then I need to fill out the rest of my fractions. So I'm going to duplicate and use this one because I already have the thirds and I just have to change my whole number. So 18, or my number on my numerator. It's not a whole number, it's a fraction, right? So 18, 19, 20. Oh boy, we've moved the 20. 20. I don't know if this is faster or not, but it's easier to read. 21/3 after 21 would be 22. 23. And 24. And that's right, I know, because 8 times 3 is 24. After 24 is 25. And then 26. And 27. And then I have to go and draw in all my lines, right? Because it's not done yet until there's a dividing line. Maybe not faster than writing with my pencil, but neater for sure. So finish this one up, pause if you're not ready, and then let's go to page 2. Okay, page 2. Partition each whole into fifths. Label each fraction, count up as you go. Box the fractions that are located at the same points as whole numbers. So exactly what we just did, except that this one tells us to do it in fifths. So my boxes. Let's put our boxes on top of the whole numbers. And this is, at least we're starting at 0, right? So 0 fifths. And then I need to put this into fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So after 0 fifths, I have 1 fifth and 2 fifths, 3 fifths, 4 fifths, 5 fifths. I have the entire thing filled, so that's 5 fifths. I'm going to go ahead and fill in my denominator on all of these. That won't change. Every one of these wholes is cut into 5 equal parts. And then after 5 fifths is 6 fifths, 7 fifths, 8 fifths, 9 fifths, 10 fifths. Pause if you need to. I'm going to go down to number 3. Partition each whole into thirds. Label each fraction, count up as you go. Box the fractions that are located at the same points as whole numbers. Same thing we just did, except that now we're going into thirds. So go ahead and partition your pieces between the whole numbers into thirds. And we're starting at 1, which means we already have 1 whole. We already have 3 thirds right here. And then we would have 4 thirds because we have 1 and 1 more. 5 thirds and 6 thirds is on a whole number, so we have to box it. 7 thirds, 8 thirds, 9 thirds is on a whole number. 10 thirds, 11 thirds, and 12 thirds. So I'm just counting up the whole time. My denominator stays at 3 and my numerator increases by 1 every jump I make. Pause if you need to. Let's look at these problems on this side. Number 4, draw a number line with endpoints 0 and 3. Okay, label the holes. Partition each hole into fourths. Put my face over here. Label all the fractions from 0 to 3 and box the fractions that are the same points as whole numbers. Okay, so let's get our number line out. There's a lot of steps to this one, and that's okay. But the first step is to make a number line, which is a line. And then I need my tool because I'm going to actually put some arrows on here. Endpoints 0 and 3. I need to think what numbers come between 0 and 3. Well, 1 and 2. I've labeled the holes, and then I need to partition each hole into fourths. Cut it in half, cut each side in half. Cut it in half, cut each side in half. Cut it in half, cut each side in half. Label all the fractions and box the fractions that are at the same points as the whole numbers. So where we have this 0, we're going to have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0 fourths. I'm going to pause and fill in the rest of my number line. I'm going to pause my video. You're going to keep working. And we're going to see if we match. So pause me, finish this problem, and then let's see if we match. Okay, compare your number line to my number line. Did you make it from 0 to 12 in your numerator? If you did, then you did it correctly. You should have 0 fourths, 1 fourth, 2 fourths, 3 fourths, 4 fourths, and that's a whole. Then 5 fourths, 6 fourths, 7 fourths, 8 fourths, that's another whole. 9 fourths, 10 fourths, 11 fourths, 12 fourths. If yours doesn't match, study mine closely and see what you need to fix. And then let's go to page 3. Your exit ticket. Estimate to equally partition and label the fractions on the number line. Label the holes as fractions and box them. So you're doing what we have been doing this entire lesson. Divide this number line into fifths. Pay attention. You are starting at 2 here. So how many fifths do you already have if you have 2 holes? How many fifths would you have? Then draw a number line with endpoints 0 and 2. Label the holes. Estimate to partition each hole into sixths and label them. Box the fractions that are located at the same points as whole numbers. This is what we did right here, except that the numbers are different. So take a look back at our lesson if you're not quite sure what to do, because we did all of this stuff together.